This is all wrong. I shouldn't be up here. I should be back in school on the other side of the ocean. Yet you all come to us young people for hope. How dare you!
Boring. 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 Boring.
You got it work. Don't tell us what we're going to feel. We're trying to solve a problem. Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
I'm not telling you.
Because you're in no position to dictate that.
That's exactly what you're doing.
You're in no position to dictate what we're going to feel.
I call again for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, the return of the sausages, the hostages.
Greetings, one and all. Lembit Öpik here on Lembit Öpik Live here on unprecedented TV, where we find the facts, kill the spin, and tell it like it is all around the world. First of all, a big thank you to subscribers. We've got almost 2,000 now. Please be one of them. It'll be a great moment when we get to our 2,000th subscriber. Please be that person. And it's free. And it means that you get all kinds of great announcements, and you can be part of the unprecedented TV world as well. A place where we sincerely hope you find an inspirational and refreshing honesty that you might not get somewhere else. Please also look up all of our other shows. We've got plenty to go by. And more than anything, we welcome your input and your ideas as we expand the station. Now, I want to give you my personal view today of the operation by Keir Starmer to try to make friends with China. There's a long history to this. Keir Starmer's been there before. Starmer vows to remain clear-eyed over national security as he flies to China, is a phrase. PM promises stability and clarity in approach on first visit to Beijing by UK leader in 8 years. Now, you might think that this is a new story. Well, it's an old story, because Keir Starmer, in my view, and I said it's a personal opinion today, is blowing hot and cold over China, the fastest growing superpower in the world. I would say the one with the mightiest army, though others claim it's the United States, and also a country which makes a very large proportion of what we buy. So Keir Starmer has flown over to China in order, if you're watching this live, he'll be there just about now, in order to be friendly with this fellow here. That's Xi Jinping, arguably the most powerful man in the world, either that or the second most powerful, behind Vladimir Putin or Donald Trump, depending how you see the world developing. Those three are certainly the three most important. Compared to that, we've got Keir Starmer, a political minnow swimming in the sea of international politics. And my issue is this, my friends. What is it that Keir Starmer is trying to tell us, and what's he trying to tell the world? Is China our friend, or is China our enemy? It's very hard to understand, because we've had totally conflicting opinions expressed both by Keir Starmer and by his cronies in years gone by and months gone by. On the one side, we're told that China is a security risk, that we can't build the huge new embassy they want in central London because they'll spy on us. They'll be sitting around listening to our private chats. Who knows? They might be listening now. I hope they are. That's a huge audience. Welcome, China, if you're watching. I did try to move there in 1997, but that's a whole different story. On the other hand, he flies across with a bunch of business people, a few journalists, to say, oh, hello, China. We want to be friends with you. Well, make up your mind, Starmer. It's really confusing. I put it to you that this headline says it all. Starmer says China policy cannot continue to blow hot and cold. I agree. But you, Starmer, are the person who's blowing hot and cold, and your people are doing the same thing. So my first point in this personal opinion today is that Keir Starmer is guilty of the very thing you see on your screen right now. Blowing hot and cold over China. On the one side, we hear all these security threats. And I'm going to tell you some ridiculous anecdote from the aircraft that Starmer's flown over to China on in a moment. On the other side, he goes over and says, oh, we want to be friends with you. Britain could be a great ally. Here's the anecdote. Apparently, a whole load of business people are on the flight as well. This is in response to the fact that Keir Starmer is being accused of spending too much time away from Britain. I happen to agree with that, by the way. I think every time he goes away, he simply embarrasses the country. But they're flying over and they are using what are called burner phones, a phone that you don't keep. They're using all this tech and these emails that aren't permanent. Why? Because China could be spying on the delegation. Think about that in two ways. We're going over there, or at least the Prime Minister is, to make friends, but they're too scared of China to use their own phones. If and when I go to China, I use my tech. I don't have an issue with that. I've been investigated by the FBI twice for whatever reason. Why would I not use a burner phone in America, which I don't? Why would I not use a different email in America, which I don't? So why is it different in China? What is it that China's got that the British Secret Service or the Americans haven't got? And then there's this idea of emails. Oh, yeah, let's use different emails when we're in China. Oh, yeah, that's because if you use an email, you couldn't in a million years hack somebody's email in the United Kingdom. What utter preposterous nonsense. We know that British governments have got into trouble because they've ended up arguing with, say, Apple. China, that was our own government, for crying out loud. So that's my first point. On the actual aircraft that Keir Starmer's going over to China in with all the business people, they're saying, oh, be terrified. They could be spying on you. I'll tell you this, second point. I worked in China. I admire China. Like every country, they're not perfect. They wouldn't pretend they are. And you can have a big ideological conversation about their system of government and all that goes with it. And I'll come to that in a short while. But when I went there, I was treated with respect. I felt a damn sight safer walking through the streets of Hong Kong or a huge city called Guangzhou, which is in the heart of China, one of the great powerhouses of China. I'm far safer walking there midnight than I do in central London. Not one time was I robbed. Not one time was I even aware that someone was trying to rob me. I've had 2 phones stolen in central London. I've been intimidated. I've seen violence. I've seen horrendous behavior by individuals and groups. You don't see that in China. Now, people like Keir Starmer, who blow hot and cold over China, might say, oh, well, that's because they're an authoritarian state. I would actually quite like to suggest you're not one to preach about authoritarianism, Starmer. You want to have the online safety bill snooping on us. You put people in prison for hurty words on the internet. You want to have surveillance more than any other city in the world, I think, including in China. Britain has London, which is the most surveilled, if that's a verb, city in the world. So on this second point, my personal experience of China has been positive. I was once a guest of the Chinese government after Hong Kong was handed back. Hong Kong was on a lease, 99-year lease, and after it finished, Britain had to give it back to China. And I have to declare an interest as deputy chair of the All-Party China Group. I didn't get paid by China. I just was interested, and that's how my relationship with China developed, because I was already very fond of China from when I'd been there before. So on the second point, the reality is that a whole lot of people in China will feel a whole heap happier about living there than those in Britain, and certainly those in London. Here's my third point. If Keir Starmer is really so terrified of China, why does he gormlessly go over there sucking up to the leadership? If China's so terrible, the way he tells us that Russia is, why is he taking a whole delegation to try to do business with them? It seems to me, my friends, that Keir Starmer's hot and cold attitude is to tell us here in Britain that China is our enemy, but then go to China and tell them Britain is their friend. The Chinese aren't stupid. They turn out 5 million graduates every year. 5 million graduates a year. That means they basically generate roughly the British population of graduates every 11 years. So that's stupid. And they're quite wily because they have huge resources. They have a military, which I'll come to in a short while. But most importantly, they have a game plan. When I was in China, when I worked in China for this big, huge American company, they told me what their plan was. They were going to develop their infrastructure. They were going to do, including their air network, that was understood. They were going to develop their economy. And when I became a member of parliament and I went to talk to Chinese, they also said they were going to become the world's biggest superpower through economic might. And they're doing all that. Quite transparent, no secret. They didn't used to tell me how terrible Britain was. They didn't used to tell me, oh, we've got to be careful because Britain's presenting a security threat for us. Instead, they wanted to do business. And they were charming, quite formal, but incredibly adept. And as a guest of, adept at international diplomacy. And as a guest of the Chinese government in Hong Kong, they left us to our own devices. They may have been surveilling us. They may have been spying on us. I don't know. I wasn't aware of it. But I know that they did a terrific job as hosts. And they were non-intrusive. And they didn't give us a hard time when I was there. Now, that's a sample of one. I accept that. It's just me. But on this point, my suggestion is that those who tell you that China is an enemy and then fly over there to try to be friends are guilty of the most terrible doublespeak. And they misrepresent the country that I worked in. After the break, I want to talk about the military side of this. And the reason I want to talk about the military side of this is because if China is really so dangerous, then why is it that that we're perfectly happy to buy highly sophisticated equipment from there? And more to the point, if China wanted to have a war with Britain, how could we win? First of all, let's remember that we have a great series called Tim Scott Uncancelled. We've increased the amount we're broadcasting that from popular demand. Tim Scott is the head of the Freedom Association, total free thinker, and fighting for your liberties in this country. What's this? I'd be interested to know what Tim Scott thinks about China, whether he's a Sinophile like me, somebody who loves China, or whether he takes the more conservative, more concerned approach of others. I'm sure of one thing, Tim Scott won't be blowing hot and cold over China the way Keir Starmer has. And you're rejoining me on Lembit Öpik Live on Unprecedented TV as I take the opportunity, the privilege of sharing my views on China. Let's go back to this issue. What does Keir Starmer really mean? China poses national security threat to UK. There'll be no security trade-offs by engaging with the world's second largest economy, says Prime Minister. That was on the 1st of December, 2025. That's about a month ago. China poses national security threats to UK. Now, I don't understand, ladies and gentlemen, how on the one hand you can say that China is our friend, and on the other hand, you can say something like that. Imagine if you had a neighbor and you said to the whole housing estate, what's that neighbor? He's spying on you. He stands on the top floor of his house with his binoculars. He's put bugging devices in your hedges. He earwigs your private conversations in your garden. And they get to hear about it. And then you go round to the house and say, hey, let's be friends. That's exactly what Keir Starmer's doing. Does he think that China doesn't notice these kinds of comments? Does he think that on the one hand, he can tell us that China is our enemy, and then on the other hand, he can tell China that he's their friend? I don't think so. What this shows isn't that China is our enemy, and I don't think they are. I think they're pragmatic. I think that they want to rule the world through economic might, not through invading and conquering Britain. But what this tells me is Starmer and his people are so dumb that they don't think that China notices when the diminutive government we've got now, the intellectually compromised ragbag of cabinet ministers are saying this sort of thing about the Chinese. I don't know if you realize this, and I stand to be proved wrong if there's somebody with better information. But I'm told that China, and the Chinese embassy in Britain, in London, has some of the lowest law-breaking records of any embassy in the country. In other words, they obey British law. That's what I think happens. And as a result of that, once again, circumstantial evidence I accept. But if you have good guests, you could assume that they're potentially good people. But Starmer says that they pose a national security threat. Now, let me ask you this question. How does building a huge embassy in London prove that they are a national security threat? A lot of people say that it does. But then if you do think that, why do you let them build the embassy? Another contradiction. Once again, we've got a doublespeak. The Prime Minister is blowing hot and cold. So my I think third point, here is that that you can't have it both ways. You can't act in one way and say another thing. There's a great phrase: you can't talk yourself out of a problem you've behaved yourself into. And Starmer and his cabal seem to talk as if they're terrified of China, but on the other hand, they extend the hand of friendship and act as if they want to lay over and let China tickle their tummy. Now, China doesn't take Britain all that seriously, I would say, because we're not very big anymore. There's remnants of bits of empire called the Commonwealth, and I'm sure China would love to get its hands more onto that economic market. But they don't have to worry too much, because with a plane full of business people flying over to China, Starmer, as the putative leader of that group, I'd have chosen someone better, someone much better, but the putative leader of the group isn't going to be able to stand in the way of deals. Because if you're on that plane, you could say to Starmer, oh, great, I've just done a £10 million deal with China. What's Starmer going to say? I don't really think you should do that. He'd say, well, why did you have me on the flipping plane in the first place? Let me move to the final point. This isn't a problem unique to the Labour Party. This is being a big case. Key China spy case witness removed enemy from evidence under Tories. Under the Conservatives, we had some of the same problems. We had people in the government who wanted to prosecute other people, like the ones in the picture there, for allegedly conspiring with the Chinese. You may have seen headlines and stories about China paying money to influence politicians in Britain. Well, I got two thoughts about that. On the first one, it was Labour that collapsed this case, I argue. Labour didn't want this case to go forward. So after having told us that China is a national security threat to the United Kingdom, Starmer's own people make sure that this case doesn't go forward. What are the Chinese supposed to think? Are we their friend? Are we their enemy? Are they allowed to lobby in Westminster? Are they not? Which leads me to the other point. Why is it wrong for China to try to influence British government, but completely right for a whole bunch of other countries to endlessly invest time and money flying British politicians to where they want them to be in order to influence them too? I have seen the cringing spectacle of at least one intellectually challenged small-time nobody, actually, who was flown over to another country and then started saying that we had to support them because if we didn't, then the whole of Western civilization would collapse. It was literally that preposterous. So why are other people allowed? Why are other people allowed to come here and lobby the British government, but when China does it, it's a great spy scandal? Once again, I welcome Labour ministers if they want to come on and explain what's so different about this. I'm not scared of China wanting to lobby the British government. In fact, it's flattering. Well, a lot of people, including Donald Trump, literally turn their back on Keir Starmer because they don't take him seriously. We've got a country that actually cares, one of the biggest countries in the world, the second most populous and the most promising. It'll be, in my view, the great superpower within 30 years. And so a case like this, once again, blows hot and cold. What would I have done? I wouldn't have brought this case in the first place, I don't think, because I don't think of China as an enemy. That's my personal experience. In fact, I have great respect for China. I have little sort of admiration for the economic and social and cultural journey they've taken in the last 50 years. If you look across the last 100 years, most people were illiterate, I think, 100 years ago in China, and most people are pretty well educated now. They have made a monumental leap forward in that time, and their economy is stunningly impressive. Made in China isn't a warning. It's actually a boast, I think, in some ways. So on this point, I argue that the Tories were a little better than the Labour Party at this, but the Labour Party are even worse. So let's bank this issue, and then I'm going to try and bring it all together. In my humble opinion, both the Labour Party and the Conservatives have blown hot and cold over China. They say to Britain that China is our foe. Then they fly across to China and say Britain is their friend. China is quite smart. They are wily. President Xi Jinping, the guy in charge, he knows what's going on. He can triangulate the reality. And so when Starmer vows to remain clear-eyed over national security as he flies to China, and then the subtext here is PM promises stability and clarity in approach on first visit to Beijing by UK leader in 8 years. Right, basically, the bit in red there, I think it's in red, I'm colorblind. Very low bar. Analysts say Starmer faces slim pickings in China. Might sum up what you'd expect. China owes us nothing. We owe China everything if we want to be in their big club. And here's the problem. The big club's called BRICS. What is BRICS? I'll come to that in a minute. Let me read some of your comments. Neil Curry says, why isn't there Labour Friends of China? I didn't know there wasn't, Neil. But I used to be the deputy chair of the all-party parliamentary group on China. And I had some of the most spectacular meetings. I was invited to some of the most wonderful events, especially the New Year's celebrations, which occurred recently, actually. And I had some concerns about Taiwan, and I was honored to have lunch with the Chinese ambassador to Britain and explained it in very clear terms, the territorial concerns and ambitions there, very persuasively, in my opinion, actually. So for me, the all-party parliamentary group on China, what was literally what it says, a group for anybody, any parliamentarian from the Commons of the House or the House of Lords, Neil, who was interested in having interaction with China in a grown-up way. And I really loved it. And I found the Chinese embassy fascinating. And they didn't try to bung me in the cellar. I'll come to that in a minute as well. Neil asks, perhaps in part due to the heroin foisted upon them at gunpoint for so long. Neil's talking about the opium wars. Let me have a quick diversion here. You need to read this for yourself, because what I'm going to tell you sounds ridiculous. But Britain, in order to try to subjugate China a long, long time ago, actually used addictive drugs in the process. Look it up yourself. Look it up yourself. But it's unbelievable. The shame on this country for what it did to China. No wonder China was so keen to get Hong Kong back after the 99-year lease. Just one more from Neil here. But the US, with its if China invades, China will invade. If China invades, China will invade China is not absurd. And oh yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah, you're talking. They're saying that China actually already owns Taiwan. Yeah, I was going to stay away from this, but there's a strong argument, and the Chinese will use this, that Taiwan was actually snaffled away by sheer brute force from China. That Taiwan was snaffled away. Once again, you need to have a look at that because it gets into more detail than I want to at the moment. But let me go back to a really central theme here with the Chinese, and this is back to my experience. As far as I could tell, the Chinese were very keen to be friendly all over the world and open up markets. And this is the point. So when Starmer says he wants to be clear-eyed, well, okay, but be clear-eyed about the fact that the real machine which China is using to become powerful all over the world is economic. China proposes national security threats to UK, says Starmer. But what about all the microchips and just about everything that we've got? I bet you every single household, which is built with bricks and mortar, has at least one Chinese microchip in it. If you've got a TV, probably China. If you've got a phone, probably China. And so therefore, there's a complete contradiction in the circumstance where if we were to suddenly wave a magic wand and remove all Chinese goods from Britain, Britain would stall. It just wouldn't be able to operate. And the internet would go down as well, by the way, I think. Neil says something useful here. 3 out of 4 adult males were addicts during the Opium Wars. That's a pretty worrying figure. And and imagine the US being so tolerant if China were operating thus on Galveston Island. This is roughly the analogy there with the Taiwan situation. Neil, you are a very well-informed person when it comes to China. I salute you. So let me move to the final observation. Let us say that it doesn't go well for Keir Starmer, and it doesn't tend to go well for Keir Starmer. I predicted when he went to see Donald Trump in, where was it now, Egypt, that he would be... What was that about? I think someone in the gallery pressed the wrong button there. But there you go. There's Tim Scott uncancelled again. Get to watch them. Sorry about that. Yeah, it was an error, but I'm a very tolerant person. Unlike Starmer, I won't put that person in prison for over a year. But I was going to say before that we were so rudely interrupted, Keir Starmer spends his time sucking up to people all over the world. Trump, who clearly doesn't respect Starmer, he literally turned his back on him at an event in Egypt, where Starmer only flew over for the photo opportunity, and then, as I predicted, actually ended up looking worse than if he'd never gone in the first place. That person just isn't going to be able to make much headroom when it comes to China. But let's say China wanted to invade Britain. How effective would we be in being able to stop it? How could we overcome a group as big as this? Look at it. I mean, that is a formidable group of world leaders. What is it that we could possibly do to try to prevent those folks from ganging up together and having a go at us? Answer is pretty much nothing. Our army would fit into the Wembley Stadium. Look at this. Look at the size of this. It's absolutely magnificent. I have to say that I think they're some of the most impressive organized military experts anywhere in the world. And they've also got a huge army. Some people say, oh, no, the army is not that well done. In fact, Dr. Marcus Papadopoulos, who was on my show recently, he said that the army looks impressive, but actually it's got old technology. I was thinking about that afterwards, and I'll raise this to Marcus. I think that's partly an advantage because it's less likely to be affected by jamming and so forth. But this magnificent spectacle here with President Xi Jinping, who I think is one of the most three powerful leaders, together with Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump. He's not going to be scared of titchy, politically tiny Keir Starmer going over there. So if they wanted to attack Britain for some ludicrous reason, there's nothing we could do about it. We can't even defend the channel. But look at the spectacle. Look at the grandeur. Look how impressive what they're doing here actually is. The Chinese are only not invading and conquering Taiwan because they don't want to. They probably think there are better ways of doing it. Incidentally, Taiwan and China, don't be fooled, there isn't an iron curtain between them. When you fly to Taiwan, often you do it from China. That's how I've been to Taiwan and back. And Xi Jinping doesn't want to have a war. I just don't believe it. I think that he's very keen on not blowing up his main markets. Which brings me to my final point today. And it's this. I think there's a real danger that Keir Starmer is going to further embarrass us when he goes to China. Here's a previous occasion when he's walking in the shadow of Xi Jinping, as well he might. Xi Jinping is a true world leader and connected to the other world leaders. It was no accident at the beginning of that video clip, you could see President Xi Jinping surrounded by some of the most powerful men and women in the world. But Keir Starmer walks in his shadow. And I think the danger of what we're seeing here is this. Keir Starmer going to China, as ever, with a total lack of self-awareness and risking embarrassing Britain yet again with his mealy-mouthed nonsense, which simply proves to the Chinese that we are a good market, but little else. If there's any hope for this visit, it is this, that the Chinese see us as an attractive market and they're impressed by the business people on that flight. The last thing we need is Keir Starmer to be representing the once great Britain in a circumstance where China, with 1.4 billion people, isn't too scared of Britain with 1/20th of the human resources. Where China, which knows how to guard its borders, isn't concerned about Britain, which has a border free for all. And most importantly, where China, with a leader, whether you like him or not, who commands respect and walks tall as a giant on the international stage, isn't scared of Keir Starmer, who, when he went to Egypt, had the embarrassing spectacle of Keir Starmer standing behind Trump saying, "Where's the United Kingdom?" Then Starmer came forward, I'm sure, expecting to be able to say a few words. Look at how he glances at the microphone. That's what it means. Instead gets handshake and Trump turns his back on Starmer. I don't think he's scared of Starmer. My advice to the delegation, if you're watching, is keep Starmer on the plane. Go and do your business. Shake the hands. Sign on the dotted line, because until the deal's the done deal, it's not a deal with the Chinese, and then come home. My advice to Starmer is stop running away from the problems you've caused in Britain. No one, well, maybe a few people respect what you're doing internationally, but I'm not one of those people because you're such a danger. You're such a danger because you put your foot in it all the time. Come back, face the music, deal with the problems you've created here, and leave international politics for those who understand it. Now, you may have a different view. Do feel free to engage with me on the text and on the tweet. Please do follow and subscribe on Unprecedented TV on the YouTube. But more than anything, make your own judgment. I can summarize mine in the following way. I don't consider China to be a security threat to the United Kingdom. I haven't been paid to say that. It's just my experience across 30 years. And I don't think that we should be making China feel that we're paranoid. We should be extending the hand of friendship to China and saying, can you do your job? We'll do ours. Let's find out where that overlaps and let's do business. The best guarantee of a peaceful world is a trading world. China is open for business. If only I could say the same about a government which has time and again proved itself incapable of even running its own. I'm Lembit Öpik. That was Lembit Öpik Live here on Unprecedented TV. Have a good day.
Immediate ceasefire in Gaza. The return of the sausages.